Hey folks, welcome to Nova Semita's Open Connect number 4. Today with us we have Karan Chawla. Karan did his undergraduation at BITS Pilani Goa campus in mechanical engineering, post which he went to UIUC uh, to complete his master's in aeronautical aerospace and astronautical engineering with a focus on intelligence systems, right? And today we'll be talking to Karan about his experiences in college, his time starting up, and yeah, like his transition from being a mechanical engineer to working in AI and picking up deep learning. Yeah, so let's get started.
Thanks, Raj.
Um,
Thanks for having me.
so thanks, Karan, for waking up. I'm guessing it's early morning, early Saturday morning that.
Yep, I'm having my coffee right now. So,
Yeah. So let's get started off, Karan, with a brief background on what your interests are, right?
mhm,
After which we'll probably talk about your time in college, right?
for sure. So, I think I like to think I have a wide variety of interests, especially starting from. So initially, I got very interested in aerospace engineering and drones because mostly I grew up wanting to be a pilot, and then I kind of transitioned into tech because I felt that pilots are going to be obsolete and there's more value writing software for hardware as opposed to just being a driver. So I got interested in that, and after that I've been so with the boom in AI technologies and computer vision now actually being usable, and uh, there are lots of very interesting problems that can be solved in that space. And I guess I kind of transitioned from mechanical engineering in undergrad, which felt like a lot of applying formulas and solving problems in a very structured format, to problems which were unexplored and which were fascinating to solve. So that's how I kind of um, yeah. So to answer your question, I'm interested in deep learning, computer vision. Recently got interested in UI and UX, so I've been playing around with how users actually interact with all the software you develop and not just the backend stuff. Um, I'm interested. Apart from that, outside of tech, I'm very interested in biohacking and like experimenting with different kinds of diets, different kinds of sleep schedules, different kinds of exercise. So yeah, all over the place.
Yeah, so that seems right about every single tech guy on Twitter, right?
Totally, totally. I bet.
So to start off, like you got into college in 2012, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, no WhatsApp, internet was just picking up, right? Learning on
Uh-huh.
the internet wasn't as much of a thing as it is right now. So how did you start off? Like, how did you start off with picking up new things in college?
Um, well, I guess when I first came to BITS, I'm from a pretty small town. So when I first came to BITS, it was like my first exposure to like really amazing people.
Mhm.
So I think the ecosystem was what helped me shape how I view the world in some sense.
Mhm.
And so a lot of it was just amazing peers. So I
Mhm.
was part of the aerodynamics club, and I had amazing seniors who were very, very smart. And so initial learning was them guiding me on how to get started.
Mhm.
And eventually, as my interest developed over time, I started reading a lot of books, doing some Coursera courses, but then it was like they're very, very basic introductions to things. So if you just want a working vocabulary of a topic, then you can do a Coursera course, but you won't actually be able to develop something out of the course. So I started working on projects on the side because I realized that Coursera courses or like online courses are pretty useless, and started working on drone projects with Aerodynamics Club, and I guess that was essentially the way I learned stuff. So I would every semester or every 2 semesters, I would try to start a different project and then uh, pick things up along the way as and when required.
So I remember that during your time in college, you, with
Mhm.
a few of your friends, were trying to work on this solar UAV project, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
I'm guessing that it was way too early for its day. But how has that influenced? How has that ambitious project influenced the way you look at tech as of today?
Um, I guess so yeah, that was, I think, one of the first times in my life when I wanted to take on something this big.
Mhm.
And looking back, I realized how stupid I was in like planning the project because yeah, well, tech aside, you need to think about a lot of aspects, right? You need to think
Mhm.
about storytelling because you need to convince people that what you're building is important. You need to convince people to give you money to
Mhm.
actually be able to do it. So I guess I neglected all those aspects when I first started the project, and I didn't and I think it was too ambitious for my skills at the time. So, had I done it differently, I would have first made a very small solar powered UAV, then going full scale,
Mhm.
and then iterate on it very, very quickly. So, I think there was no iteration involved there, and I think iteration is very, very important in every aspect of whatever you're building. So, start small and then go scale slowly, I would
Yeah,
say.
I think rightly said. Being agile is one important learning that every college student should probably imbibe when it comes to their own projects. Um,
Totally.
and so on a similar theme, Karan, do you see this solar UAV say taking flight sometime in
Uh-huh.
the future? Do you think tech is going to catch up in the next decade or so to make it possible?
Um, I have doubts about it. I mean, we would definitely have solar powered drones, but I guess it's a complex topic in the sense that yes, they're technologically feasible, but do we need them is the
Mhm,
bigger question.
mhm, mhm,
And and also there's multiple technologies that need to get better to
mhm,
so that we can achieve the vision. One is the energy density of lithium ion batteries and the efficiency of solar powered cells.
mhm,
Uh, and a good competitor for solar powered UAVs is just a constellation of CubeSats, as we're
mhm,
seeing more and more. Like Elon Musk is launching CubeSats, there's Planet, there's Digital Globe. So I guess if you just have very tiny satellites all over the atmosphere
mhm.
in the lower orbit, then you don't really need a solar powered drone
I
because.
guess that makes sense. Yeah, Karan. So let's moving on to your journey into the US.
Mhm.
You kicked off your master's program. How was that experience like, and how did it differ from what you'd been through in India?
It was very, very challenging. Um, so it was, so I guess undergrad was challenging too, but in a different way. So in undergrad, you were required to do all these courses, and then you had these very defined paths you had to follow to
Mhm,
get good grades, right? But I guess in masters, it was more open ended in the sense that we were being taught these things. Um, but then most of the courses that I took had projects at the end of it. So we had to decide what project we're going to build, what um, what thing we learned in the
mhm,
course are we going to apply. Plus, I guess the teaching quality in itself was just way, way better.
mhm,
Um, it's kind of sad because yeah, because the focus is not on if I show you this pattern of problem, if can you solve it in exam. The focus is on, oh, this is how a problem is solved,
mhm,
and look at the solution. Look at the way they're approaching the problem, and kind of internalize that.
Mhm.
And maybe we'll give you a slightly different problem, and maybe you'll not use any of this.
Mhm.
It's very like there's this element of surprise to each exam there, because it can be very, very hard,
Mhm.
in which case you will fail. Or yeah, but there's no pattern matching. Like
Mhm.
I think Indian colleges, there's like a lot of pattern matching. You solve like 100 questions or before the exam, and then you are going to get a subset of those in the exam, which is very stupid. And real world does not work like that. So I guess projects in masters were more interdisciplinary, which I like, and they were more open ended. So you weren't just using things you learned in one course, but like a combination of multiple things. So I guess that was cool.
So talking about interdisciplinary studies, right? So how did the
Hmm.
transition from being a mechanical engineer, right? I mean, when one thinks of a mechanical engineer in India, the usual conception is that of people, who are working with their hands and
Uh-huh.
self-confessedly, like they run away from code, they run away from programming, right? So
Uh,
how did you make the transition to picking up deep learning, and how would you advise
uh,
people to go about that?
uh, right. So I think in my undergrad, did, I was very comfortable with software, especially C++ and Python.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess tools don't matter. So I take that back. In my undergrad, I was comfortable with software, period.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but towards, so I had a 6 month thesis,
Mm-hmm.
which was not at BPGC. So
Mm-hmm.
I got those 6 months to basically basically think about what I wanted to do next, right? I had applied, so that was also the time when I was applying for master's degrees, because even though I had a job at Gray Orange, I knew I didn't want to stay in India long term,
Mm-hmm.
um, for multiple reasons, but this most important reason was that I wanted to learn more, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I had gotten enough out of my undergrad education. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for masters, because that's the only path which is forward. I'm either gonna do a master's or gonna do a PhD, right? Because you don't have these cutting edge startups in India where you can just go and work. I mean, Gray Orange was, I guess, the closest I could get to.
Yeah, I mean, back in
Um,
2016,
yeah,
definitely things were completely different.
right. So I applied for master's programs. So I was still very interested in the intersection of uh, aerospace or drones with software, as I
Mm-hmm.
said, as I mentioned earlier. So I wanted to do my master's with in aerospace, but I wanted the focus to be in intelligent systems. Um, so those 6 months, as I said, gave me enough time to think about what I wanted to do next, and also pick up a lot of skills. So that was a time when I was like reading a lot, uh, because apart from my thesis, I literally had nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I was my thesis was a very standard research job, which was like 9 to 5. uh, and then after 5 I was completely free to do whatever I want. So from 5 to like 12, I would be studying deep learning, computer vision, because even though those courses, I don't remember if we were taught those courses in undergrad, but
Not really.
yeah, so I was just picking them up online.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer your question, the way I was picking them up was very haphazard, because I try to optimize for how what I can learn in the first 10 hours or first 20 hours of getting introduced to a subject. And so I was just like watching one video lecture here, then reading some notes here. So it was just a combination of very different things. I think and I like that, because if you read the ninth chapter first and then go back to a video which is explaining you the second or third chapter, you kind of like, oh, this is what that meant. And you kind of, that kind of helps you build a map of things and how the thing you're learning is structured. So I guess that I found that useful, but not to be prescriptive. Just I think I would say do just use the form of learning you are the most comfortable with, whether it's video, whether it's text, whether it's watching lectures, whether it's watching YouTube videos, whether it's doing a project. It does not matter.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think there's nothing more beautiful than building your own mental map of a particular
Mhm.
discipline, right? Like
Totally.
throwing stones around, sticking, seeing what sticks.
Exactly. Like
Something like
run small experiments, see what's working. Why you use this activation function? What happens if I use like a cosine? You know, you never know. Like that's how you learn things, I guess, by
And I guess
experimenting.
as Naval Ravikant says, there's no excuse that people can give. I mean, pertaining to the lack of content, right, when it comes to education in today's
Exactly.
time.
Like we are living in like 21st century, and there's like so much information. Like we have more information than any human who's ever lived on Earth. Like you literally have zero excuses to not know what you're passionate about.
So, post college, I guess you took up a job at Skyrise. How,
Yeah. So sorry, what were you saying?
yeah, how did that go? And how did that influence your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. So right after college, so I was applying for jobs. So I did an internship before at a startup after
Mhm.
my first year, and that was in San Francisco. They were developing like agriculture robots, and I wrote some motion planning software for them. Um, so after that experience, and I had worked with a few, 2 or 3 other startups before in undergrad, but it was kind of done remotely. So after that experience of doing an internship, actually at a startup in San Francisco Bay, um, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for at least the next 5 years of my career, because I want to optimize for learning. I
Mhm.
want to learn as much as I can for the next 5 years. So I didn't apply to any big corporations, even though I could have. So I was only applying to startups which seemed fascinating and which seemed like, oh, I'm going to learn something here. So I applied to Skyrise, got in after like 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, which is very standard for a Bay Area company, which I think is ridiculous, but
Mhm.
whatever. Um, so yeah, what does Skyrise do? They develop autonomous helicopters for to be used as eventually used as air taxis. So they come in the category of deep tech startups. What did I do at Skyrise? I did a bunch of things. So they were post seed, so post seed round startup. So we had a bunch of very very smart people in the company, and we were developing stuff like guidance logic. So if you want to have a helicopter which can take off autonomously, how do you do that? How do you write software to go from point A to point B, for example? And that was very, very exciting, because now you're sitting in a helicopter actually with all these helmets, and there's a test pilot, and he has his hand on the stick all the time, and there's like a button he presses which lets the autopilot take control, and then the autopilot is actually the software you wrote. So it's like literally relying on software to for your life,
Yeah.
because if the software does anything wrong and the test pilot can't take over, you're dead, right? So that was very very exciting, and I think that kind of accomplished my goal of like working at something very very out there, and I also met like amazing people out of it. So
And so, how did
that
you
was pretty.
transition from that into starting off with your own venture? I mean,
Yeah. So, so as I said, we were working with these test pilots, and these test pilots were like very, very smart people, like PhDs from Stanford, working at the National Guard. So, and they were helping us with our test flights.
Mm-hmm.
So they would go to, so I don't know if you know about like forest fires in California,
Mm-hmm.
but there's literally thing called fire season, which is 6 months of the year you're gonna have massive forest fires, and there's this team of people called Cal Fire, which is funded by the government, the federal government, and Californian government, and they basically fly helicopters on top of the fire and uh, try to stop it, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
by pouring different kinds of reagents on on the fire.
Okay.
So these pilots would go for 2 to 3 weeks in the middle of our test flights and help Cal Fire. And then when they would come back, they would tell us how antiquated the whole firefighting system is, and um, how like we can use technology to solve this. And me and my co-founder Matt, we started thinking about this because they were like very pestered, and they this didn't just happen once and we were like, okay, we're gonna go stop forest fires, but it happened so many times over the 8 months I was working there that I was like, this is a serious problem, like, um, and if nobody solves it, we're all gonna die, because this is related to climate change, and I think the next generation of entrepreneurs really need to um, move away from solving problems very which are hyper local to solving problems which are relevant to the world, um, especially as climate change starts becoming more catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt and I started working on this on the side, and started thinking about how started learning more about the space in general, like how do they do it now, why do they happen in the first place, and eventually we quit our jobs to start a company when we wanted to, well, it started with wanting to create a drone to basically have like an endurance of 5 to 6 days,
Mm-hmm.
because we were very clear from the very start that we wanted to create a solution which won't just be active for 20 minutes or 1 hour, but something which was more long term, so that we can do persistent intelligence on that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we learned it, and that's why the name Resolute comes in place, because that's what we wanted to name the company. Then we started talking to people, pilots, and we saw that the infrastructure industry, so sorry, the oil and gas industry and the utilities industry, the way they're maintaining the infrastructure is 75 years old. So if I tell you how they maintain it now, you won't be able to sleep at night. The way they maintain it is literally there's a pilot in a Cessna, and they fly down the infrastructure, and they visually see what is wrong with the infrastructure, take photos on their iPhone, take notes on a notepad, go back home, create a Word document about the things they saw, and report it back to the company. And when we read that, we were like, well, this industry, yeah, maybe they'll have drones in 10 years, but first we need to like get them to a stage where um, we can like get them to a place where they're more comfortable adopting more technology.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another thing we saw was they weren't very open to new technology. They had these massive gatekeepers, and who were basically making sure what tech comes into the industry. So we decided that we don't want to do a drone anymore, and we kind of pivoted to actually just putting very, very cheap FAA friendly sensors on these aircrafts which are already flying. So there's 8.1 million miles of infrastructure in just North America
Mm-hmm.
that is inspected every week of the year by different pilots across the country flying in Cessnas or helicopters. So we will, and none of these have any sensors or any payloads. So we were like, what if we just create a very cheap sensor platform to convert all these traditional aircrafts into sensor nodes in the sky. So,
Mhm.
and create a data moat around the company and use all that data to train an artificially intelligent, narrow intelligence system, which can detect threats to the infrastructure, predict threats to the infrastructure. Um, and all of this is available to you on a web portal. I don't like to call it web portal because it's actually essentially a web app,
Uh-huh.
but the industry likes to call it portal
Okay.
because they're still stuck in 1970s.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
that reminds me of the freaky, clunky portals that we would
yeah,
visit
with
back.
just like two form fields in there,
Yeah.
login and
So, how do you see this evolving in the next few years? I mean, how quickly do you think drones are going to come in? Because that'll, I mean, as with automation, right, that's going to drive a lot of people out of their jobs. A lot of existing infrastructure, that is the Cessna planes, as you said, they're probably going
definitely.
to go out of order. So, what are your views on automation and the talk around UBI and such?
Um, I think. I mean, I don't think it's a massive problem. I don't think it's as big as um, we've created it to be.
Hmm.
Um, I think every time in the past when humankind has had like a step function in technological progress, we've always created more jobs as opposed to lesser jobs. And maybe people will work on things they actually like, or like use their hobbies and create job. I don't know. Like I don't think I have the authority to talk about um, what it's going to be like, and I think very few people do, because as the as the derivative of like technological progress keeps increasing, it's going to be very, very hard to predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Like in 2006, nobody would have predicted the tech ecosystem we have now, right? So
Absolutely.
so in 10 years, we don't know what's going to happen. Like maybe everyone is just
And that's
working
it.
on climate change technologies, who knows.
That's an absolutely fair statement to make, I guess, Karan. So diving into things that you talked at the start, I mean, your experiments in diet and sleep. How have they been coming along, and what have you learned?
um I think so starting a company is essentially, it's equivalent to the Olympics. And
Mhm.
I think it's very, very important to treat yourself as an Olympic athlete as opposed to just another programmer who is going to
Mhm.
write code all day long. And I think it's essential to treat everything as an experiment. Um, so just I don't want to be prescribed. Like there are lots of fad diets you can follow, and you can just go vegan. You can just eat grass. You can just drink water. I don't care. The important thing is you experiment with your diet to figure out what works for you, what works for your body, what works for your productivity, what helps you be in the flow state longer, what helps you, what kind of music you like when you're writing code. I don't know. Um, so in my experience, I think sleep, the ultimate nootropic, although it takes a few hours to apply, but uh, sleep, food, exercise, these three things are like the pillars on which you can, if you have these figured out, only then can you go on and create um, something amazing. I think our culture also fetishizes like working super long hours, and movies you see Mark Zuckerberg like writing code for 5 days straight. Well, that does not really happen in real life. You need to actually go out and talk to people, figure out what their problems are, and actually then build a solution around it. So yeah, so, and since I'm a very hyper competitive person,
Mhm.
I like to think that my competitors are like exercising 4 days a week, eating right food, getting 8 hours of sleep, and coming up with these awesome creative and amazing ideas to the technical solutions they're facing. So that kind of, if that framing helps for you, just do that. Like, uh, yeah, take care of yourself. I guess that's the important part.
Fair enough. Fair enough, I'd say. I think we're coming close to wrapping up.
Mm-hmm.
So closing lines and what advice, I mean, if I may call it that, what advice would you give to people who are looking to break into tech or looking to probably make a mark for themselves out there in the world?
Um, let's see. I don't know if I'm smart enough to give advice. I'm just a normal guy, guys. I would say, one, work very, very hard. Like, there's no substitute to hard work. And anyone who says you just need 4 hours of work week or whatever, like, does not matter. You need to work very, very hard. You need to work very, very smart too. So don't just be the person who's like, oh, I'm going to stay in the office. I'm going to be the last person who leaves the office.
Mm.
So just work super hard, but also take care of yourself. And constantly iterate. As I said, iteration is the key. Figure out what works. Everything with every human interaction you do, it's an experiment. Uh, don't be bland. Ask interesting questions. Um, and just get exposure to as many things as possible early in life. Explore as much as you can and figure out what are the interesting problems you would like to work on. And yes, final advice would be uh, to see everything in your life from a third person view as opposed to a first person view. So what I mean by that is, instead of saying I feel angry, uh, think about it as I am feeling anger. Sorry, think about it as like, uh, this thing has angered me, and then try to think about why that has happened, or what part of your psyche was affected when this person said X thing to you. Because um, because it's very easy to live life on autopilot mode and not think deeply about what it is that you want to do, or what it is that you're doing, or what it is that you're feeling. So it always helps to have like a third person perspective on everything you're doing. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, I guess as you mentioned, asking difficult questions is,
Yeah,
is super critical, right?
exactly. Like, I meet so many people, and everyone just asks very bland questions like, oh, how are you doing, how's your week going? Like, you're meeting this person and you have this 1 hour with them to get to maybe change your worldview, or maybe learn something super interesting. So ask them about that. Like, this person has had at least whatever the age is, 25 years of experience on Earth. You can learn from them. So I think it always helps asking interesting questions.
So I think this was a wonderful chat, Karan. Um, if you
Thank you.
have any,
Appreciate it.
if you have any request or if you have any offer to make to the community to help you out with whatever you're doing, I think now is the time.
Um, I guess you can reach out to me on Twitter or Gmail, and I'm very approachable guy. You can always email me or DM me on Twitter and ask me questions. And I try to do as much as I can to help you guys.
That's good stuff, Karan. So, uh, folks who've tuned in, we've come to the close of another of our Open Connect sessions. Um, if you're in India, if you're a college student and you want to break into tech, I think now is a good time to consider, checking out what Noah Semita is up to and signing up for the fellowship. For all you know, you might be working. alongside Karan in a few years' time. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Nova Semita is awesome, guys.
Yeah.
Raj is awesome.
So that's it for tonight, guys. Have a good weekend, Karan.
You
See you
too. Take
around.
care. See
Yeah.
ya. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.